Hello!
Hello AOS fans!
It's the Agents of Underworlds.
And in this video we're looking at the brand new hot off the press rules updates.
Just before Christmas we were going to record a video, we didn't quite get around to it, which was all we want for Christmas is an FAQ.
Yeah, exactly, and we despaired that we might ever get one, but one arrived.
So in this video we're going to run through some of the updates they've done, some of the ones we think are great, good, maybe some of the ones we think are terrible, and then just give our opinion on what we think of this update overall and what it means for the game. Before we get into any of the rules updates though, we're going to talk about those Forsaken cards.
Yeah, totally unexpected.
Yeah, that was a real mic drop situation.
It was, and this isn't in the rules update, I believe it's in the organised play document, so it's in a slightly different place, but essentially 4 cards have been booted out and they're all from the same Rivals deck.
Yeah, unsurprisingly they're all from the Reckless Fury deck, which when we looked at it originally and we first opened the pack, it was just like, these are overpowered.
Yeah, I sent Pete little photos of the cards that are interesting. It's like, bloody hell, look at this, oh my god, look at that.
I think GW previewed some of them online, and one of the ones they previewed, which is the give one of these charge tokens to another fighter. Every big lad warband is going to love that, because you're going to charge with him, you're going to move that charge count to someone else immediately, or charge with the other person first, then move your charge count to them, and charge with the big lad again.
So these 4 cards, they're all from the Reckless Fury deck, and they're all Forsaken, so they're all banned. You can't use them. Now, interestingly, the table does have space for banned and restricted cards, but there just aren't any restricted cards at the moment, so we don't know whether they're going down that route. And
it even mentions that you can take up to 3 restricted cards, which seems a bit pointless considering you're only going to have 60 odd cards in a Nemesis deck to choose from. But anyway, so of the 4 cards that have all been banned, you can probably guess them. If you've played any games of Underworlds, you can probably guess these, but we'll just run through them quickly. One is Get It Done, which is you can move your charge counter, as we mentioned, to another fighter.
Which is really, really strong.
Massive.
Blade Catcher is one of those ones I kind of hadn't really thought about how strong it was. Basically, it's an upgrade, but it stops your opponents using weapon abilities against you. I love that card. We had a little mini session with some local people.
Local people from local Underworlds.
Over Christmas, and as soon as Blade Catcher came out for the Jaws of Victoria, like,
no more Grievous, no more Cleave.
Yeah, it's like,
screw you.
Exactly, it was just absolutely lovely, lovely. So that was a card I hadn't realised quite how good it was.
Yeah.
Fury of Akshi.
This is one of those ones I think we kind of, again, didn't really appreciate how good it was to start with, and then we actually used it and we were like, actually this is mental good. Actually, this is mental good, because you can charge up to somebody and they might have already charged, and you can hit them and you keep them next to you, and then if they've charged out all their warband, they still can't hit you because they have to make a charge. Yeah. And now they can't.
Yeah, it's quite good. Or if they haven't charged already, you basically, they force them into the charge after you've attacked them. Then it stops them just standing there going bang, bang, bang. So it is really good. I have to say, I don't think that's as broken as some of the others.
It depends on the situation, I think. I think it's quite broken though, and I think it's also really good for if someone's on an objective, you just run up next to them and poke them in the face a bit, and even if you don't knock them off, you go, hey, you're going to have to charge off of that if you want to do anything at all with that fighter. Yeah. And it was also quite nasty when coming up against people like the Warden, you know, when you had those key fighters, you're like, I'm going to hit you, and you're going to have to charge away from me, and that's going to waste an action that you probably would like to have done other things with instead. So
utter ignorance though, that was proper broken.
That most broken card of the whole lot, which was basically, if your fighter gets killed, actually they don't die.
Basically they become vulnerable, you don't lose any of your upgrades or anything, so they just literally don't die.
The thing that annoys me is they could all have been made just a little less amazing.
Yeah, well they were
and been all
cards.
pickable.
They tended to be for specific fighters in version 1, but there were cards that stopped you from dying. Yes. But you had to roll the dice.
Exactly, yeah.
So their best effect was mostly to dissuade people from attacking you. Yeah. It was kind of like, actually, I don't want to do an attack and then discover that they're not dead. And
not only that, but I've got a really annoyed Fuel standing next to me now with a 4 damage attack. He's about to knock my block off.
But you, at the same time, you could kill them.
Yeah.
And so you kind of like, well, okay, it might be worth the risk. Whereas now it's just like, once they've got that card on them, it's like there's no point going after them really. No. And you just, they get stronger and stronger and stronger, and it's quite an oppressive experience.
Yeah. So they've all been put on the Forsaken list. There's an argument there to maybe putting them all on the restricted list instead, and just saying you can have one of them.
Yeah.
And then you've got a bit more of a difficult choice on which one you take, and what your build is might change what you take, because you might definitely take Utter Ignorance if you're a Sepulchral Warden player, maybe Ephelim or something like that. But you might not if you're Drom, because you've already got a backup resurrection thing with Drom, so actually I'll take Fury of Akshi or something like that.
So it'd be interesting to see if they keep that restricted number at 3.
Yeah.
Because as it stands at 3, they have to ban all these cards. Because there's literally no point in saying, well, you could take 3 of them.
Like, oh no, I'll only take 3 of the amazing cards.
Exactly. So but if it was 1, then I think they could probably all be restricted, and you just had to pick. And then play, probably, like you say, you pick Utter Ignorance.
I can get that a lot of people are quite narked by this because they just forked out money for a deck of cards, and they've been told, well, in Nemesis play, you've now lost 1/8 of your card options in total, or 1/5 of your power card pool.
It's not ideal.
It's not great, especially when all of those cards could have been made just slightly worse and still been completely playable, but not utterly broken.
So that's that bombshell out of the way.
Yep.
Now we're going to look at all the other kind of rules update changes.
One of the first things they've changed in there is the drive back rule.
Yes, and somewhat excitingly, this change has actually been made in the downloadable rulebook, which I don't think they ever really did previously.
Don't think
in the old
so.
version 1 days.
And even more exciting than that, they actually even put in the update which page it's on in both the physical and the digital version, which is quite funky, I think.
Oh, that is very useful.
I do like that.
I do feel like, just as an overarching comment, that they could do a bit more change loggy stuff. So you could say, it was this, it is now this. So you can actually see what the change is, because some of them are very subtle. And you're like, well, how's that changed? And you're not really sure. It would be really helpful. And if they are going to change the rules, it would be helpful at the end of the rules if they had this was changed on this day. So you can see what's going on. GW, hearken our words.
Also, it'd be good to have that, because quite often the change doesn't actually change the rule. They just fiddle with the wording a bit, just to make it a bit more in line with the rest of it. So you're sitting there for ages going, I don't know what's different about this. And then you finally work out, oh, there's nothing different about this, but we'll come on to those.
It's just the same, but with different wordage. And this kind of is this change to the drive back rule. If they've just clarified a kind of edge case scenario. So basically they've clarified it so that if you make a combat attack and you fail, and then your opponent also fails their defense dice rolls, then that's a draw. But there is no pushback, because there's been no success or anything like that at all. So that's kind of, if there's no successes, can you still drive back? I think was the question, and the answer is no.
Yeah, basically. The next one that they've clarified was already sort of clarified at the Worlds event, and that leaked out and people could see that, and we both read it and were quite despairing by it and hoped they changed it. They kind of haven't, and we're both, I think, quite disappointed by the ruling here. And it's to do with what you do when you have surges that happen at the same time.
Yes, not so much surge objectives, but surge ploys or effects that happen in the game.
But the way it works is, in my turn, if something happens and I think, oh, I've got some surges here, I can say, I'm going to play my first surge card in this moment in time.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I'm going to go, actually, I've got one too, so I'm going to play my surge card.
And then I sit there and go, actually, I've got a second one, and I'm going to play that as well.
Yeah, and I go, well, actually, I've got another one, and I'm going to play that. And we keep going until we've got no cards left. Yeah. Or, I mean, I have to say, this doesn't come up very often. I think the chances of actually 2 of you playing 2 surges at the same time,
or even one, could be quite slim.
It's pretty slim. But you basically keep going till you haven't got any more
you both
to
pass.
play, and you both pass, and then you resolve yours.
Yeah, I resolve all of mine, because it's my turn. And then you resolve all of yours. And then if I do something with one of mine that means that one of yours is now no longer playable because someone's been moved or pushed or whatever, you now lose that card. It's played, it's gone, it doesn't do anything, and that's it. We would have both preferred if it had just been a case of, okay, it's my turn, I've got a surge, I'm going to play that surge, and then I resolve that surge, and then you go, oh, well, I've got a card as well, so now I'm going to play mine, and I'm going to resolve it, and yada, 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 and you go in that order.
But I kind of feel like it's just adding some confusion and possibly some negative experience for a player. If something happens which means you then lose your card that you tried to play, I think is a bit rubbish.
It also just feels a bit clunky where it's like, okay, you declare yours and I declare mine, you declare another one and I'll declare another one, and once we stop declaring them, then we start working them out. But I get to do all of mine first because it's my turn, you have to wait before you can do any of yours. It just feels like if it was just play them in order and as they get declared, that just feels like it would be smoother, but again, it is what it is.
I do feel like it's slightly moot, because I don't know, do put in the comments below if you can think of any, but I don't think it's ever come up where 2 people have tried to play cards where it hasn't been like, well, I'm going to play this, and they go, well, I'm going to do that. And maybe we've done it wrong, but I haven't had any situation where I felt that we've tried to simultaneously play cards, because they're quite niche.
That's how that's defined, and hopefully we've explained it well, but if we haven't, do share in the comments below.
So the other answers to questions are mainly cosmetic. We won't go too deeply into those, but there was one that caught our eye about inflicting damage. damage.
And that says, can damage inflicted on a fighter ever be reduced to 0?
And the answer is no, unless an ability states otherwise.
Yeah, and that generally is underlining that point that in the rulebook it does say that no stat can be reduced to 0 ever. So you can't reduce someone's movement to 0, you can't reduce the damage to 0. 1 is the minimum, unless it states specifically on the card. There were 2 other small rules updates that are fairly generic, but are just nice to have clarified so you know where you stand in the grand scheme of things.
Absolutely. The first one pertains to treasure tokens. After the setting up phase and after the tokens have all been flipped face up, during the game, if any get delved and turned back over, you are allowed to have a look and see what numbers they are underneath.
You'd have to sit there going, oh, is that 2 or is that 3? Which one was where? I can't remember.
And we definitely had a game where you couldn't remember which one it was to move on to. And I think in the old game, you weren't allowed to look. So I think that's... I'm sure there are some people who say, oh, it's just dumbing the game down, or you have to remember what these things are. But it just, you don't get any feel-bad moments where somebody gets distracted and then moves on to the wrong one by mistake and misses a glory.
And there's no skill in just remembering, oh, 5 was over there and 1 was over there and 3 was over there. That's just something some people are good at and some people aren't, and that shouldn't be a determining factor in a game. No. So it's not.
That's true. Unlike rolling crits, which some people are good at and some people just aren't.
And the other one is, when you're playing in a Nemesis format game, what do you have to tell your opponent? And the answer is basically everything. You have to tell them what the rivals decks are you're playing with and what the warband is.
Yeah, so that kind of clarifies, because I think in the rulebook originally it just said which rivals deck you're using.
Yeah.
And didn't mention Nemesis at all. But there are some people who like to jealously guard which their rivals decks they're taking, which is not me. I think I did encounter somebody in a tournament who said, are you gonna, what rivals that you play on? I'm telling you.
And they immediately throw away like a Force of Frost card. You're like, you're playing Force of Frost, and there we go.
Yeah, exactly.
So now we're going to start talking about some of the warband changes that have come in, and I think first off, it's obvious we're going to be talking about Drom.
I mean, to be honest, this is the thing that everyone was waiting for
and
was hoping was going to be a massive change, and it is a massive change. I don't know what happened to the original card, whether there were some printing mistakes or whatever, but it was obviously massively, massively overpowered, and it has been nerfed.
It is quite interesting to see that they haven't made any stat changes to the fighters whatsoever.
But they have changed the abilities on the War Scroll card.
They have. Now, the first one, Enrage, which is you could pick a fighter, and this used to be pick a fighter in the power step, and then resolve a charge for them. And that could be any fighter. It could be one of yours, could be one of your opponents. That was horrific with the Gore Hulk. Early game, like round 1, you could literally charge with him and then use that ability to charge with him again and possibly kill a really big fighter or 2 medium-sized fighters right off the bat, crippling your opponent.
Yeah, and it was probably the main set of impressiveness from the Drom card. And now you have to spend 8 blood tithe counters, and it has to be your opponent's fighter that charges.
Yeah, now the 8 blood tithe counters is probably not a big thing. You're going to have loads of them at some point, but only being able to pick one of your opponent's fighters to charge is a massive nerf to it now.
It is, and of course the 8 blood tithe counters, you couldn't. People were doing it turn 1.
Yeah.
Charge, bang, bang. It's like, oh great, this is great, and it's effectively getting extra activation. But that is now gone. You're giving an extra activation, in fact, to your opponent. Yep. It still has some utility if you're playing against a hold objective warband, and you know they're about to score supremacy. You can force them to charge off, or if for some reason you want to get onto an objective, you can force somebody to charge off an objective. But it's much more niche and it's much more costly now to use.
Yeah.
Final Frenzy, another incredibly powerful ability, has been nerfed. Final Frenzy essentially allowed any one of your fighters to have a second stab at being alive. So when you were reduced to 0 wounds, you could roll a number of dice equal to the number of blood tithe counters you had, and you healed that many wounds.
Yeah.
So I heard stories of people when they were playing like against Sepulchral Guard, and they were rolling like 20 dice to resurrect the Dwarhog, and he was going up to
back to full
or whatever it was, and it's gone now.
Yep, they changed it so that now you can spend as many tokens as you want still, but they only come back vulnerable. So they only come back with 1 wound left, and they will die at the end of the round as well. So even if they come back and you have a healing potion or some other way to get some more healing onto it, they're still going to die at the end of the round regardless.
So it's a massive, massive change. That doesn't feel overpowered. I think that's pretty much how it used to work. In version 1, the ability to bring back a fighter, even vulnerable, even a good fighter vulnerable is strong, but the actual ability to bring back a really good fighter is just insanely good, especially as it doesn't break any of their upgrades or anything.
Yeah, they don't die, so you don't give any glory away, they don't inspire, they still get to smack people around for the rest of the round, they just die at the end, which I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, so I think that's a massive, massive change, clearly a nerf. and hopefully it will mean that people won't take Drom to quite the same level, and that Drom is on a par with everybody else.
One good example of where they've changed something but haven't changed it at all, they've just tweaked the wording, is on the Morgox Crushers, the get a move on your Gits ability, because in the previous wording it would say something like, instead of playing a power card, you can use this ability, and now it basically just says, use this in a power step, just to follow the wording on everything else, but it hasn't actually changed the function of that ability whatsoever.
Absolutely. And Ilthari's Guardians hasn't really changed the function either, but there was some confusion about how they inspired, and now it's just very clear that they get their tokens when they either at the end of the round or when somebody is killed, not in a round when somebody's killed, which some people will try to interpret it. So again, there's a lot of kind of quality of life changes just to make things a bit clearer and understandable, so there isn't sort of arguments over the board.
There have been a few stat changes on a few fighter cards, and one of them worth talking about is Fast Riders.
So yeah, I think everybody thought the Fast Riders had some strange typos on their fighter cards, and indeed they have. On the very first melee attack, or their melee attack, it's changed now from swords to hammers.
One update that Games Workshop gave us, which really hasn't helped clarify things at all, is Mollog.
Absolutely, it's quite possibly that Spike Shroom's been giving out some funny stuff, because the rules clarification really doesn't clarify too much. It clarifies a tiny bit, but it's still baffling why it's been left the way it's been left.
Yeah, in the original card, verbatim, it says this fighter cannot be removed from the battlefield unless it is slain, pushed, or moves. So you would immediately think, oh, maybe he can be pushed and then he's dead.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense because it doesn't say anywhere that he can't be pushed. I thought he'd be like, well, you can't push him, and then somehow if you can push him somehow, then he dies.
Confusion or something, he's dead.
But there's a question in the rules update: is Stalag Squig slain? Try saying that when you're drunk. If it is moved or pushed,
and the answer is no. So he can be pushed, and he can be moved, and he's not slain when that happens. Yeah. So that would then change the original wording of this fighter cannot be removed from the battlefield unless it is slain, pushed, or moved to this fighter cannot be removed from the battlefield unless it's slain. Yeah. Which is pretty much
unless it literally means it can be picked up. But I just don't even get what it's trying to say.
No, they need to update that to basically say something like the Stalag Squig cannot make any moves or be pushed, or something like that.
If that's what they want it to say.
That's what they want to say, yeah, because it's currently clear as mud.
I'm pretty sure he has movement 0, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So the chances of it, I suppose you might get plus great speed.
Wins a war.
Great speed.
All right.
Is it?
I don't know.
Great speed would be +1 movement, wouldn't it? So then in theory he could like hop about.
Yeah, so
speedy stalactite. So yeah, it does clarify something, I suppose. It means that you're not going to get any shenanigans, people trying to kill the Stalag Squig with something weird, but it's still not entirely clear what the design intention is to me. No. So Skinnerkin have had what is on paper quite a big change, but in reality nobody thought it could possibly work like that. So it wasn't really a big change, but it's been clarified that their abilities can only be used once per round.
I feel like they're still quite a weak warband, and I would have liked to have seen that change to something like, you can use this once per round or more whenever you're the underdog. Right, something like that, so that if they're losing, they can use it a bit more, maybe.
You've played it a bit, we've played them a bit more than I have, so you've probably got a bit more.
I just feel like they're a little bit toothless at the minute, and it was not... quite strangely. But yeah, I feel like they could have done something with a little bit more, but this is obviously much more obviously what it should be, because every turn was just over the top. And one of the last few is that all of the Skaven minions now have a little minion symbol on their card. They are
actually minions.
They are actually minions, which I think everybody knew, and nobody was ever going to say, oh, you can't use Critch's ability because you haven't got any minions. I think if anybody had tried that one, just good luck to you if you think you're going to get away with it. But now they're definitely minions, so there you go.
You can resurrect them.
Yeah.
Probably the second biggest losers in this room is Pete.
No.
Oh, hang on. No, that's not right. The second biggest losers in this rules update is the world champions, the Thricefold Discord, and they probably needed it. Although, interestingly, they weren't nerfed in the place I expected them to be nerfed.
No, they've had a few changes to most of their base special abilities. None of them have been really completely destroyed, but I think we're quite okay with the changes that they've made with most of them.
So Evasive has had a little change. It's really quite a nice ability. There's a couple of evasive fighters in the Warband, and if they could roll after they've been damaged, they could roll a dice, and if they got a hammer or a crit, then the damage was reduced by 1. That's been changed to a sword or a crit. So it's just taken down that
half to a third. So
yeah, taking it down a little bit. So it is reducing. It's going to obviously trigger less, so that makes them a bit less resilient.
The next one is on Indolent, which is for Vexmore himself. He gets the ability where if he has no move or charge tokens, he gets +1 dice and Grievous on his attack, but it has to be his attack, so you can't give him a weapon upgrade and then add it to that as well. So
yeah, I didn't even look at that interaction. I don't know whether they're really great, because there are not a lot of weapons in the new game.
No, but you've got a few range 3 attacks and things, so it could have been abused a little bit there, but not so now.
No, so that's good. And then they've clarified Vile Temptations to read properly.
Yeah.
Effectively, it was quite heavily abused, I believe, at the World Championships because it could be used at any point in time, and now it can only be used during your power step.
Yeah. In the Worlds event, you would see people charge in and roll their attack dice to hit, say, the Warden, knowing he maybe had an upgrade, so he was rolling 2 shields, and you roll your 2 attack dice and go, oh, I've got 2 successes. So now I'm going to use this ability to remove your +1 save and give you some other rubbish upgrade instead, so now you can't stop my attack. That just was always broken to me, and I can't believe people, 1, even suggested that that was a legitimate way to play it, but 2, other people went, okay, yeah. I would have refused to play at that point.
I'd just got on his plane and gone back home.
I would have. But now it's in the power steps. You have to commit before you roll any dice, which I think is the only fair way that could have been done.
Still nice and strong. You could still like pop somebody's Great Fortitude off and kill them. So I quite like the idea of doing it. So it's still a good ability.
It's a nice ability, but you might find yourself in that position where you're like, I'm going to remove your +1 save. Yeah. So now you only roll one dice, and then you charge in, and then you miss.
Yeah.
And so it's just not a guaranteed use thing.
No, exactly.
Now.
It hasn't got as much utility, like you say, it's not such a dead cert.
It's a little bit more risk involved, which I think's okay in this game. Another warband that got a little bit of a kick that maybe we felt didn't need it, but did need some clarification on, is Zarbag's Gits.
Yeah, they basically had the old infinite scurry problem.
Yeah.
Where basically they could just keep triggering the move action that they do, and that's been nerfed and heavily nerfed.
Heavily nerfed, yes. You can only use it once, so you can only scurry one other person when someone moves, but you can do that every turn. Not as good as it was, but I don't think anybody ever thought that it was as good as it was.
So you get a change going, and they have to have no more charge tokens.
It needed nerfing, it needed clarifying, it got that. Maybe a bit harshly, but maybe we'll see it change later on.
I've heard from you that they're very strong at the moment, or were very strong.
I've been told they've won several clashes.
Right,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
But maybe that's because they're not using the change to old Snurky Boy, which has just come in.
Yes, the spinning ability on Snurk. Before, you could choose when you inflicted damage on people. So if one of your fighters ran past him, you just didn't inflict any damage on them. But as soon as Vexmore came plodding over, you just smashed him in the face.
Yeah, or the belly.
Yeah, probably the belly.
But now you basically, and it makes an awful lot more sense, you now have to injure whoever moves through your zone of influence.
Yeah, and it does absolutely make sense because Snurk is just a spinning ball of chaos. He's going to hit everything and everything. And he still is a really powerful fighter and can really cause your opponent a lot of problems. You can really lock up areas of the board with him.
Close down areas of the board, make it really, really tough.
So you just have to be a bit more careful with him when you do use him. And then we come on to some of the cards in the Rivals decks themselves, and I think most of them are just clarifications on how those cards work, but it's nice to get an idea of how GW envisaged these cards to work. So for ones they haven't mentioned specifically, you've got examples there already that you can look at.
So the first question is from the Blazing Assault deck. I actually quite like the way they've, it's nice and clear. This is the Blazing Assault Rivals deck, this is Canada Classic, this is Sentinels. The first card for Blazing Assault was Wings of War, and there was to me, slightly nonsensical FAQ going around from the World Championships, but they've clarified it very clearly that now you can use Wings of War as part of a charge action, and not only that, you can use it and then declare a charge on something that is 5 hexes away. If you've got a movement of 3, you can add 2. Wings of War adds 2 move. And the reason that it was slightly odd was because the rules state that you start by declaring who you're going to charge, and then you do the move, and the card says you play it when you do the move, not when you make the charge. So in theory, you can't declare the charge because you can't reach. But now you can. So basically, it supersedes that, and you can say, well, I'm going to charge, and then I'm going to use the Wings of War to do it. And bang, there we go. Yeah.
An interesting one on the Countdown to Cataclysm Rivals deck is that you don't have to move the tracker along. Whenever you have a point in time on your card that says you may move your tracker along, it is a may situation. So at the end of a round, when you're saying, oh, you're not standing on 4 objectives, or 4 treasure tokens, I should say, I can move my tracker on 4, you might go, actually, I'm only going to move it on 1, because if I move it on another one, I'm going to end up into the 3 step, and that's going to make it much harder for me to score wreckers later on, and blah, blah, blah. So I think a lot of people are barely going to use that counter. They're going to get it up to like, right, I'm on to 2, and it's staying there now.
Yeah, 2 with him. Maybe poke it into 3 if you want to get a 3 shield save on somebody. But yeah, it's slightly counterintuitive to me. So it's not really a countdown to Cataclysm. It's kind of like a just I don't know what.
Shall we have a Cataclysm?
Maybe what do we want?
Maybe a Cataclysm. When do we want it?
When it arrives.
Maybe later.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that. But anyway, that is the rule. So that's going to make Cataclysm a little bit stronger, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So that's all the changes that GW have dumped on us very unceremoniously. Some very big changes in there and some very questionable ones.
Yeah, it's totally thrown me into a sort of maelstrom. Because first I was like, before it came, I was like, well, if they don't put out an FAQ, I'm not even sure I'm going to bother going to the Grand Clash, because what's the point? Because everybody will be playing draw and it'll be really boring. And now I'm like, oh my god, I don't know where I stand. I don't know what's good. There are too many options. I can't cope, and my head's going to explode. So I do think that they're mostly really good changes. I mean, I
think so.
Tackling drama and bringing down the Thricefold discord is definitely a good thing. They've clarified a few obvious printing mistakes. I think on balance it's really good. I think that probably the most massive change is that they've come out and banned 4 cards from the Rivals deck.
That was a massive change. That has almost completely gutted that deck now, I think, and it'll be tempting to sort of say that deck's rubbish and it's no good now. It might still be quite good. It's just people were used to it being absolutely amazing, and now it's not anymore.
Yeah, I think the most important thing of that is that I really hope it makes GW look at how they do their QA before they release stuff, because to just come out and essentially rip a fifth of the cards out of a power deck is just mad, I think.
It's a lot of cards to take out, and it does annoy me that we had to get to this point, that GW's QA process on those cards, because all of those cards that have been banned could have been made slightly less good with a little wording change here and there, and then probably none of them would need to be banned, because they'd all have a decent amount of drawback to make it balanced. And it just feels like they've done none of that. They've just slobbed this deck out and gone, oh, that's really crap, we should get rid of all those cards now.
Do you know what I think they did? I might be wrong about this, but I think they tested it within the confines of what it's supposed to do.
Possibly.
So like there's lots of charge movement, there's objectives for having multiple charge tokens and moving them about and stuff, and I think they tested that. Oh yeah, that's not too bad, completely forgetting that actually all people are going to do with it is just allow,
so I can attack 3 times with Drom.
Exactly, allow massive fighters to attack as often as possible.
But I don't know how anybody could look at that upgrade, which is your fighter doesn't die and they stay alive, and thought, that seems reasonable. There was nothing reasonable about that.
I don't know who they know, but you can bet they played Jaws of Itzel.
Yeah. I think overall, I'm glad to see the changes, and at least it's a month before the Clash, so we've got time to do something else.
Yeah, no idea what.
No.
But we have got time to change.
Yeah. Would we like to see less of this? I think, yes, we'd like GW to be in a place where they don't have to release their erratas and FAQs, but we live in the real world, and Games Workshop are going to Games Workshop, so we're going to get them. As long as they can keep them in this quite nicely laid out format where it's nice and clear, it would be nice to have some kind of, like you say, a log of when these things change and what they were and what they changed to, but baby steps, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we have at least got the document, and it isn't a week before the competition. That's really good. I think once a quarter is probably fine. I mean, we're probably going to get another Warband between now and April, so one just after that comes out. They're going to get loads of data from this big event in Nottingham. They must be drawing data from all the events that they do in Nottingham and from around the country and the world, hopefully. And there's the massive data project going on. I know that's only a sort of fan-based thing, but I'm sure GW will be looking at it.
Sure, it'd be silly not to, really.
Yeah, well, absolutely. So I'm hoping that we'll keep getting regular updates, and they'll keep tweaking. Maybe we'll see a card drop out of the Forsaken. Or maybe they'll restrict them and just say you can only take one of these 4 or something. Who knows? They've got options.
Given you're only going to have 60-odd cards to pick from in Nemesis format, it seems silly to say you could have 3. I can't think of any situation, maybe one will come up, where you're going to have 2 decks and each one's going to have 4 restricted cards in it or something. So make all of them restricted and just say you can have one of these. And I think you'd still have some options there to play with. Maybe everyone's always going to take the "you're not dead, you come back again" card, but
probably maybe a double charge.
Exactly,
which is best. Probably depends which stage of the game it comes out.
Exactly. So it would at least make people have to think a bit more about those kind of things, and maybe that's the way they can go with it. The one thing I am quite annoyed by is that out of all of this, which has been good, all the stuff they've released, they have given us new digital fighter cards and everything. That's great, but they haven't given us digital versions of the printed cards. That's annoyed me slightly, because now we're back in that situation where you've got your Drom card, there's text on here, and none of that's true anymore, and now I've got this other piece of paper, and I don't like that. I'm hoping that we can find a way around that.
It's classic
somehow.
not wanting to print the stuff that you can buy, isn't it?
Exactly, it is.
Or
Yeah.
digitally not print, the opposite of print.
Yeah.
Not wanting to allow updates, so then people might start playing it without buying it, even though they have somehow got the model. So I'm not quite sure about that.
And the fact that they're all online already, and
Yeah.
there are people out there in the community who have already done new versions of the cards with the updated text, and God bless all of you, because people need that.
Yeah, I think GW have said that they won't allow printed cards that they've bought.
Yeah.
But I mean, are they going to get everything out of a sleeve and check?
Yeah. Well, also, what you can do now with DROM, it's like, I updated it myself and printed a new one off because you guys are too bloody lazy to do it. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, it's like, it's all right if I write it on with crayon, but it's not all right if I print myself a nice new one.
Exactly. It's just mental. I don't think they will do anything, to be honest. I think if it's obvious you had the original and you've got a printed new version, whatever, they're going to be like, whatever, we don't care. But
if you're playing with like 2 Ps and a chess piece, they might be more annoyed.
Yeah. Overall, I am annoyed that they haven't given us those digital versions, but it's Games Workshop will make do and come up with their own alternatives instead.
So that is our overview of the rules updates. It's not entirely exhaustive, but like I said, the one things we've missed are very small, tiny changes or changes that we don't really know the impact of. But there's nothing major at all that we've missed, hopefully. But let us know if you think there's something really key that we haven't put in this video.
And don't forget to click that like button.
And click that subscribe button.
And we'll see you soon, maybe in the Underworlds.